What if I told you that in one part of the country you can make more than $250,000 and still be considered middle class, but in another state, you can land in the middle with a household income closer to $60,000? It sounds wild, but it's real. And it all depends on where you live. In this video, we're breaking down the salary you need to earn to be considered middle class in each U.S. state using one simple, consistent definition. And when I say salary, I'm really talking about household income. The total money coming into the household in a year. If two adults work, you add both incomes. If you do side work, overtime, or have another source of income, that counts too. Also, middle class here isn't a feeling. It's a math definition that researchers often use. A household is typically considered middle income if it earns between 2/3 and twice the median income for that place and household size. For this list, we're using a family of 4 as the baseline because it's a common reference point. If your household size is different, your numbers will shift. One more important reality check. These numbers are about where your income sits compared with other households around you. They are not a direct cost of living calculator. They don't automatically tell you whether you can comfortably buy a home, afford childcare, or take vacations. They show how high or low the middle starts based on the income ladder in that state. Now let's go state by state, starting from the highest middle income entry point and moving down. And as you listen, keep this in mind. Two states can have very different middle income starting lines, and yet you might still feel squeezed in both places, depending on your rent, debt, childcare costs, and healthcare. Massachusetts comes in at the very top. For a family of 4 to be considered middle income in Massachusetts, the household needs to earn at least $115,457 per year. The full middle income range runs from $115,457 to $346,372. In and around Boston, prices can climb fast, so it's common for families to hit middle income on paper and still feel like they're constantly budgeting. Next is the District of Columbia. For a family of 4, the middle income range starts at $112,401 and goes up to $337,204. DC is one of those places where the pay can be high, but so are the everyday costs, especially housing. That's why the middle can feel like it comes with a lot of pressure. New Jersey follows right behind. A family of 4 enters the middle income band at $107,703, with the upper end reaching $323,110. Near big job markets like areas closer to New York City or Philadelphia, expenses can rise quickly. That can make the lower end of this range feel less comfortable than the number sounds. Maryland is next. For a 4-person household, middle income starts at $105,841 and reaches up to $317,524. Parts of Maryland are closely tied to high-paying job corridors, especially near DC suburbs. That pushes the income ladder up, and it moves the middle up with it. Connecticut also sits near the top. A family of 4 is considered middle income starting at $104,589, with the range extending to $313,766. Depending on where you live, that same income can feel very different. Areas tied to major commuting zones can carry much higher housing costs, which changes the day-to-day reality of middle income. Washington is next. The middle income entry point for a family of 4 is $101,179, and the middle income band runs up to $303,536. If you're near Seattle or other expensive areas, the lower end of that range can feel tight. If you're in a lower-cost part of the state, the same income might stretch more. New Hampshire also crosses the $100,000 mark. Middle income for a family of 4 starts at $100,991 and extends to $302,974. In the southern part of the state, especially closer to Massachusetts, housing can be a big factor. That's part of why the middle starts where it does. Colorado comes next, with a middle income range for a family of 4 starting at $99,339 and topping out at $298,018. Growing cities and fast-changing housing markets can make a big difference here. The same income can feel comfortable in one area and tight in another. Minnesota is next, with middle income starting at $97,093 for a family of 4 and reaching $291,280. The Twin Cities region can feel different from smaller communities, but statewide the income ladder is still high enough that the middle begins close to 6 figures. Hawaii follows, with middle income for a family of 4 starting at $95,464 and going up to $286,392. Hawaii is a strong reminder that middle income doesn't automatically mean comfortable, especially where basics like housing, groceries, and utilities can be unusually expensive. Alaska is close behind. For a family of 4, middle income begins at $95,137 and extends to $285,412. In population centers like Anchorage, local prices can shape how far income goes. In more remote areas, daily life can come with different costs and trade-offs. Virginia comes next. A family of 4 enters the middle income band at $92,602, with the upper end at $277,806. Northern Virginia pulls a lot of weight here, with incomes that tend to be higher. That shifts where the middle starts, even though costs vary across the state. New York follows. For a family of 4, the middle income range starts at $91,221 and stretches up to $273,662. New York has huge differences between regions. Downstate areas can be incredibly expensive, while other parts of the state are much more affordable. But statewide, the middle still starts high. California comes next, with middle income starting at $91,166 for a family of 4 and topping out at $273,498. California has multiple high-income metro areas, and that pushes the statewide median upward. That's why the middle begins at a level many people would consider a strong income. Oregon is next. A family of 4 is considered middle income starting at $89,181, with the upper end at $267,544. In and around Portland, housing can heavily shape what middle income feels like. Outside the big metro areas, the same money can go further. North Dakota comes in very close to Oregon. Middle income for a family of 4 starts at $89,175 and goes up to $267,524. In some places, local industries influence wages. Still, the key takeaway is that the middle starts higher here than many people expect. Illinois follows, with middle income starting at $88,291 and extending to $274,872 for a family of 4. Chicago and surrounding areas can influence income levels and costs. But even beyond the metro area, the statewide range reflects the overall income ladder. Pennsylvania comes next. For a family of 4, middle income begins at $87,465 and goes up to $262,396. The experience of this range can vary a lot between major cities and smaller towns. Still, this gives you a clear benchmark of where the middle starts by this definition. Wisconsin follows, with a middle income starting point of $84,981 and an upper end of $254,942 for a family of 4. In larger hubs like Milwaukee and Madison, costs can be higher than rural areas. That's why people with the same income can feel very different levels of comfort. Rhode Island is next. Middle income for a family of 4 starts at $84,934, with the range extending to $254,802. Smaller states can still have high-cost pockets, especially near major cities or coastal areas, and those costs can affect how the lower end feels. Delaware comes next. A family of 4 is considered middle income starting at $84,712, with the upper end at $254,136. Delaware is shaped in part by its location near larger job markets. That can influence incomes and housing costs depending on where you live. Vermont follows. The middle income band for a family of 4 starts at $84,387 and reaches $253,100. $160. Vermont shows how housing supply can matter just as much as income. In some areas, even a solid household income can feel tight if housing is limited. Utah comes next. Middle income for a family of 4 begins at $83,822 and tops out at $251,466. Growing areas can change quickly, and that can affect both wages and prices. The middle line here reflects the broader income picture across the state. Maine follows with a middle-income entry point of $83,039 and an upper end of $249,116 for a family of 4. In coastal or tourist areas, costs can behave differently than inland areas. That changes how the lower end of the range feels in real life. South Dakota comes next. A family of 4 is considered middle income starting at $81,575, and the middle income range runs up to $244,724. Some areas are growing faster than others, which can change housing and job markets. Still, the benchmark shows where the middle starts statewide. Kansas follows, with middle income starting at $80,899 and extending to $242,696 for a family of 4. Larger metros can feel different from rural communities. This range is a statewide guide, and local conditions will still shape your day-to-day reality. Nebraska is next. The middle income band for a family of 4 starts at $80,656 and goes up to $241,968. Cities like Omaha and Lincoln can bring higher costs than smaller towns, but statewide the middle begins a little above $80,000. Iowa follows, with middle income beginning at $80,351 and topping out at $241,054 for a family of 4. This is where you start to see a cluster of states with entry points around the low $80,000, which is very different from the top of the list. Arizona comes next. A family of 4 enters the middle income range at $79,913, with an upper end of $239,740. In fast-growing areas, costs can rise quickly. So even if the entry point looks lower than some states, it doesn't automatically mean life feels easier. Georgia follows, with middle income starting at $79,712 and reaching $239,136 for a family of 4. Metro Atlanta plays a big role in incomes and costs, and that helps shape the statewide benchmark. Idaho is next. The middle income entry point for a family of 4 is $79,031, and the range extends up to $237,092. Growth and housing demand in certain areas have changed what middle income feels like on the ground, especially where housing prices have moved fast. Ohio follows, with middle income starting at $78,541 and going up to $235,622 for a family of 4. The cost picture varies across the state, but this gives you a clear statewide benchmark. If you're close to the lower end, housing and transportation will usually be the biggest deciding factors. Montana comes next. A family of 4 enters the middle income band at $78,384, with the upper end at $235,152. In places where demand has increased quickly, housing costs can change the experience of the middle, even if the income number looks reasonable. Michigan follows, with middle income starting at $77,719 and reaching $233,156 for a family of 4. The reality of this range can vary between larger metro areas and smaller communities, but the numbers show where the middle begins statewide. Missouri comes next. A family of 4 enters the middle income range at $76,447, and the range extends up to $229,342. In larger metros, costs can be higher, while other areas can feel much more affordable, and that difference can shape what middle income feels like. Texas follows, with middle income starting at $76,311 and topping out at $228,934 for a family of 4. Texas is huge and diverse, so the same income can feel very different depending on where you live. Big metros can come with higher housing costs, while other regions may stretch that income more. Nevada comes next. The middle income band for a family of 4 starts at $75,413 and goes up to $226,238. In places like Las Vegas and Reno, housing can shape budgets quickly. This range gives you the statewide benchmark, but your local area matters a lot. North Carolina follows closely. Middle income for a family of 4 starts at $75,386, with the upper end at $226,158. Fast growth in some regions can influence both wages and costs. That's part of why the middle starts around the mid-$70,000. Indiana comes next. A family of 4 enters the middle income band at $75,239, and the range extends to $225,716. In commuter zones and growing cities, housing and childcare can be major budget items, even if the income level sounds solid. Florida follows. For a family of 4, middle income starts at $74,993 and reaches up to $224,978. Florida is another state where location inside the state matters a lot. Housing and insurance costs can be major factors, especially in certain markets. South Carolina comes next. Middle income for a family of 4 begins at $74,761, with the upper end at $224,282. Even with a lower entry point than some states, rising prices can still make the lower end feel challenging depending on your rent, debt, and family costs. Wyoming follows, with middle income starting at $72,317 and reaching $216,952 for a family of 4. Local economies can shape income patterns, and costs can vary depending on where you live. This range gives you the statewide middle benchmark. Tennessee comes next. A family of 4 enters the middle income range at $70,627, with the upper end at $211,882. In growing cities, costs can rise quickly, so the lower end can feel tighter than people expect, especially if housing has gone up. Kentucky follows, with middle income starting at $69,544 and extending to $208,632 for a family of 4. This is where the middle begins to dip below $70,000, which highlights how different the income ladder can be from one state to another. Alabama comes next. Middle income for a family of 4 starts at $68,535, with the upper end at $205,606. Even at this level, comfort depends on your big monthly expenses. Housing, car payments, insurance, and childcare can easily reshape what your income feels like. New Mexico follows. A family of 4 enters the middle income band at $67,063, with the range extending up to $201,188. Different regions can feel very different here, but the statewide numbers show where the middle starts by this definition. Oklahoma comes next. Middle income for a family of 4 starts at $66,830 and goes up to $200,490. This is one of those places where the entry point is noticeably lower than the top states, showing how the middle shifts depending on the state's income ladder. Louisiana follows. A family of 4 is considered middle income starting at $65,957, with an upper end of $197,870. Even though the entry point is lower than many states, day-to-day comfort still depends heavily on housing, debt, healthcare, and family responsibilities. Mississippi comes next. Middle income for a family of 4 starts at $62,883 and tops out at $188,648. This is one of the lower starting points in this list, and it shows how much the definition depends on the statewide median income. West Virginia follows closely. For a family of 4, middle income begins at $62,634 and goes up to $187,902. The statewide definition reflects income patterns across the state, but your local costs can still make the lower end feel very different in real life. Arkansas comes next. with the middle income band for a family of four starting at $62,207 and extending to $186,622. This is a clear example of the big gap across the country. The middle starts far lower here than it does in the highest-ranking states, even though many families may still feel financial pressure depending on rent, debt, childcare, and healthcare. Now that you've seen these numbers, here's the big takeaway. The word middle doesn't mean one national salary. It changes based on local incomes, and that's why the starting line can be above $115,000 in one place and closer to $62,000 in another. The middle is a moving target because it's tied to where you live. To make this information more useful in real life, let's talk about how to actually use these numbers without getting discouraged or confused. First, convert the annual number into something you can feel. A quick way is to divide by 12 to get a monthly amount. For example, $84,000 a year is about $7,000 a month before taxes. Then remember, most people don't live on their pre-tax income. Federal taxes, state taxes, in some states, Social Security, Medicare, health insurance premiums, retirement contributions, and other deductions can shrink what actually hits your bank account. That's why someone can make what looks like good money and still feel like they're scraping by. Second, think about the big three expenses that decide whether you feel comfortable: housing, transportation, and food. If your housing cost is high, it can swallow a middle-income paycheck fast. If you have a long commute, one or two car payments, high insurance, and gas costs, that can also shrink your breathing room. And when grocery prices rise, you feel it immediately, especially with a family. Third, remember that household size and household situation matter. Two households can have the same income and a totally different life. One family might have two kids in daycare, and another might have older kids in public school. One household might have student loans and another doesn't. One might have a mortgage locked in from years ago, and another is paying today's rent prices. Same income, different reality. Fourth, don't treat this list like a verdict. Treat it like a benchmark. If your household income is below the lower end of the middle income band in your state, that does not mean you're failing. It simply means that, by this math definition, you fall below the middle income range for a family of four in that state. That's information you can use for planning, goal setting, and pay conversations. Fifth, if you're thinking about moving, don't compare salary alone. Compare the full package: pay, taxes, housing costs, childcare costs, insurance, transportation, and what kind of lifestyle you want. A higher salary in a high-income state can get eaten up by housing. A slightly lower salary in another state might stretch further if your biggest expenses drop. Now let's talk about practical steps someone can take if they're trying to move closer to that middle-income range or feel more stable inside it. One practical step is to focus on income growth in realistic ways. For many people, the fastest income growth comes from changing roles, switching companies, or adding a skill that increases pay. That could mean certifications, learning a new tool for your job, picking up a specialized license, or moving into a position with clearer promotion paths. Even a small raise can matter if it's consistent and builds over time. Another practical step is to protect your budget from silent leaks. These are the expenses that don't feel huge one at a time but add up across the month: subscriptions you forgot about, frequent takeout, delivery fees, small impulse buys, and high-interest payments. Cutting everything isn't the goal. The goal is to cut the things you don't actually value so you can use that money for what matters most. A third step is to build a buffer. A lot of financial stress comes from having no cushion. When an emergency happens, a car repair, a medical bill, a job disruption, it can throw the whole household off balance. Even a small emergency fund can reduce that stress. A good starting target for many people is 1 month of essential expenses, then building toward more over time. The point isn't perfection, it's progress. A fourth step is to be intentional about big decisions, because big decisions beat small ones. Housing choice matters more than skipping coffee. Transportation choice matters more than cutting a streaming service. If you can lower your housing cost, lower your transportation cost, or reduce high-interest debt, you can create real breathing room even if your income doesn't change overnight. And finally, If you're already in the middle by this definition, but you still feel tight, that's not unusual. It often means your costs are high relative to your income, or you're carrying heavy obligations like childcare, debt, or family support. In that situation, it can help to separate two ideas: being middle income on paper and feeling financially secure in real life. They are related, but they are not the same thing. So here's the question to end on. When you look at the middle income starting line for your state, does it match what life feels like where you live? And if it doesn't match, what do you think is the biggest reason? Housing, childcare, healthcare, debt, or something else?